everyone, and welcome to Past Conversations. Delighted today to be joined by Dr. Katy Jack. Katy is a medievalist, the second medievalist that I've been lucky enough to speak to so far on Past Conversations, so very much looking forward to today. And also a wee bit of breaking news as well. Katy has recently just taken on the role of Visitor Experience Manager at the National Museum of Flight here in Scotland. But what I'll do now is I'll just pass across to Katy and she can say hello.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and yeah, exciting to be here after taking on such an exciting role.
Katy, first question, curious to know about your memories of studying history at school.
Absolutely. So many fond memories of history at school. I actually spent my formative years in the Middle East. So we had such a great diverse curriculum over there. And we studied ancient Egypt. That's one of my fondest memories. I did think I wanted to do Egyptology when I was older, but I quickly moved on from that and decided to do Scotland instead. When I was doing my GCSEs down in Cumbria, when we came back to the UK, I loved the subject of history, but the things that we were studying, while interesting in their own right, kind of the Cold War, Prohibition, things like that, they were absolutely fascinating, but not fascinating enough for me to want to take that forward. And I think I kind of moved away from that. For A-level, I didn't take history at all. I just moved on from it. Ended up failing all my A-levels anyway, because I didn't like the subjects I was doing. These things happen. And then I decided, you know what? I've lived abroad for so long. I want to know more about my past, where I've come from. Scottish history does that for me in Braveheart. I grew up with Braveheart and I thought, you know what, I'm doing this. I'm going for it. So yeah, I think, those are my fondest memories of just having a bit of everything, but also the teachers. I had some phenomenal history teachers at school, Mrs. Richardson, massive shout out, who taught me to empathise with the figures that we were learning about in history. And I think that's carried through into everything that I do now. So those are my fondest memories, I'd say.
Now, Katy, as I mentioned in your introduction, you are the second medieval historian that I've been lucky enough to speak to on Past Conversations. But I'm curious to get your opinion on sort of why medieval history, why is it worth studying, what fascinates you about it?
I think what fascinates me about it is that despite how far we've come and how far removed we are from it, there are so many themes that run throughout the topics that I study, that I teach, that I engage with, that actually are still relevant today. So I think although maybe we don't have the same kind of kings stabbing their brothers for power, good, that's a good thing. It is still fascinating that the power play is still there, the way that we engage with family connections, with networks, it's all still there, and it's fascinating. And also it's just really dramatic and romantic, and we don't actually have a huge amount of sources for medieval Scotland, which in some ways allows you to interpret things differently, and you can really engage with it, build your own story, keeping it factual, but also gives you a bit more freedom. I think to really engage people with that's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating.
Katy, probably a bit of a difficult question now, but of all the kings and the queens and the castles and the palaces, suppose I'm really asking you here, who or what are your favourites?
I would have to say I gave this a lot of thought when I was doing my PhD, and it's formed a rather unpopular opinion. I stand by it. Favourite king for sure is James the First of Scotland. Absolutely brilliant. People really don't like him. They think he's really greedy and he takes a lot of land, and he does take out his entire family in a kind of vengeance move. But he's a fascinating character in history, and I think he's been through so much, and yeah, he's my favorite king for sure. And I also quite like his wife, Joan Beaufort, so that could be my favorite queen. For I think palaces, I worked at Falkland, so I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it was one of my favorites. But last year I was fortunate enough to visit Linlithgow for the very first time. It's been on my list to visit for years, and I finally went to see it, and I was absolutely blown away by it, just the sheer size of it, the scale, the fact that it's another Stuart residence. And I think that's, yeah, it's pipped to the top there of being my favourite. And castles, Kildrummy, because it's the power centre of the Earldom of Mar, which is what I studied. And it's just, if you ever get the chance to go, it's this phenomenal ruin. But you can still see the shell of it, and I think you still get that sense of power and authority and purpose that I sometimes feel is missing from other places that I just don't really get a sense of, but you do with Kildrummy, and it's just situated in beautiful landscape and it's stunning.
Katy, just lastly, before we finish our conversation, just curious if there's anyone watching or listening who themselves might have a slight interest, shall we say, in medieval history, but they're perhaps not sure how they go about learning more. What advice would you give to them?
My advice would be the way that I did it, certainly, because I kind of fell into Scottish history when I decided actually I want to know a bit more about my past. I'd been abroad for so long. Speaking to, if you're being taught, speak to your teachers, ask where you can get more information, because generally, we've had to do work to look onto it, so they'll know if there's stuff that they can point you in the right direction, or even point you to somebody who knows more about a particular area. We are so fortunate now, particularly in the past couple of years, that there are so many documentaries, so many feature films now on Netflix, all these kind of platforms that we've got now to access. Kind of the films on Robert the Bruce, the recent film The King, I think, which is on Netflix, all of them which engage with these periods in history that previously have just kind of been left untouched because we don't really know much about them and nobody really wants to kind of get involved with that side of things. Reading books, even if it's historical fiction or if it's horrible histories books, I still return to my horrible histories book on Scotland. I think it's Bloody Scotland. I think I've had it for years and it's dog-eared now, but it's such a fun way to engage with history. And yeah, just don't ever let anybody tell you that there is any wrong way to engage with something. If you watch a film and other people are like, that's the worst film I've ever seen, yes, I'm looking at Braveheart, because I still get that. But it inspired me and it moved something in me where I think this is what I want to study. If that works for you, take it and run with it, and then see if there's something else that you can explore on top of that. And yeah, go and visit sites, speak to tour guides, speak to people, and then just roll with it, because there's so much. That's the thing, there's so many different things within, you can say medieval history, but it's politics, it's family, it's romance, it's art, it's culture. So yeah, just pick something, start with it, and then keep picking at that thread.